Ever walk into a motorcycle dealership in the 90s and see a bike that made you stop dead in your tracks, only to watch it disappear from showrooms a year later? The 1990s were weird like that. Brilliant engineering, innovative designs, motorcycles that should have changed everything, and then they just vanished. Today we're counting down 10 forgotten motorcycles from the 1990s that were actually brilliant, machines that deserved better than their fate. So buckle up, because some of these are going to hurt. And hey, if you're enjoying this trip down memory lane, hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel out. Number 10, Triumph Speed, Triple T 509. Before the Street Triple became everyone's favorite hooligan machine, there was this, the T509. Launched in 1997, this was Triumph's first real attempt at building a modern naked sport bike. And honestly, they nailed it. The thing is, nobody noticed. While everyone was obsessed with fully fared superbikes or cruisers trying to look like Harleys, Triumph built something completely different. A 985cc triple engine pumping out 97 horsepower. Not earth-shattering numbers, sure. But the way it delivered that power was special. The engine was basically stolen from the Daytona 900, but Triumph retuned it for more mid-range grunt. Peak torque hit at just 6,500 RPM. On paper, that doesn't sound exciting. On the road, different story entirely. This thing would wheelie in third gear without even trying. The throttle response was telepathic. You thought about accelerating, and suddenly you were doing 90. It was like riding controlled chaos. But here's where it gets interesting. The T509 had this weird single-sided swing arm that nobody asked for, but everyone who rode it loved. Made changing the rear wheel a 5-minute job. The suspension was fully adjustable Showa stuff, high-end components for a naked bike in 97. The frame was a steel tube perimeter design that handled like it was on rails. Magazine testers kept saying it felt like a superbike with the fairings ripped off. They meant it as a compliment. The styling, though, that's what killed it. Triumph went for this industrial, almost steampunk look with exposed frame tubes and a bug-eyed dual headlight setup. Some people loved it. Most people looked at it and went, "What the hell is that?" In Europe, they got it. The bike sold decent numbers in Germany and the UK. In America, crickets. Dealers couldn't move them. By 98, Triumph redesigned it into the more conventional-looking Speed Triple we know today. Here's the tragedy. The T509 was actually ahead of its time. That whole naked sport bike segment that exploded in the 2000s, the T509 was doing it in 97. If you can find one today, which is nearly impossible, they're going for stupid money. Collectors finally figured out what they missed the first time around. Number 9. Bimota V-Due, 500. Even the name sounds expensive. These Italian lunatics spent the 90s building motorcycles that cost more than cars and broke down if you looked at them wrong. But when they worked, magic. The V-Due was supposed to change everything. A 500cc two-stroke V-twin in a chassis that weighed less than a mountain bike. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. But for about 5 minutes, this was the most advanced motorcycle on the planet. The engine specs were insane for 1997, direct fuel injection on a two-stroke. Nobody had done that before in a production bike. The thing made 72 horsepower from 500 cc's. That's superbike territory from half the displacement. The whole bike weighed 335 pounds wet. For comparison, a modern Yamaha R6 weighs 414 pounds. Bimota built a time machine and nobody noticed because it kept breaking. The fuel injection system was the problem. Bimota developed it in-house, which in hindsight was like asking your cousin who knows computers to build you a spaceship. The mapping was wrong. The sensors failed constantly. Bikes would run perfect one day, then refuse to start the next. Some caught fire. Actually caught fire. Owners were either calling lawyers or calling tow trucks. There was no middle ground. But when it worked, Jesus. Magazine tests from the period read like religious experiences. The power delivery was unlike anything else. Smooth and linear like a 4-stroke, but with this manic top-end rush that only 2 strokes can deliver. It would rev to 11,000 RPM and sound like the world ending. The handling was telepathic, the brakes were Brembo's best. It was basically a Grand Prix bike with lights and a license plate. Bimota tried fixing it. They released a carbureted version called the V-Due Evoluzione. Only 21 were made. They're worth about $50,000 now if you can find one. The fuel-injected ones, most got bought back by Bimota and destroyed. The few survivors are garage queens that nobody dares ride. It's the motorcycle equivalent of owning a Rembrandt that might spontaneously combust. The really sad part? Bimota was right about everything except the execution. Direct injection two-strokes could have saved the engine type from extinction. Cleaner emissions, better fuel economy, more power. KTM and Aprilia are doing it now with their modern two-strokes. Bimota just tried it 20 years too early with technology that wasn't ready. Classic Bimota, really. Number 8. Yamaha. GTS 1000 motorcycles have used telescopic forks since forever. They work fine. Nobody was complaining. Then Yamaha decided to reinvent the wheel. Well, not the wheel, the thing holding the wheel. In 1993, they released the GTS 1000 with hub center steering, no forks, just this bizarre aluminum arm thing that looked like it fell off a spaceship. The motorcycle press lost their minds. This was the future. Telescopic forks were dead. Spoiler alert, they weren't. The rad front end, that's what they called it, was actually licensed from an American inventor named James Parker. The idea was brilliant. Separate the steering from the suspension. No more dive under braking, no flex in corners, perfect geometry all the time. BMW was watching, Honda was watching. Everyone thought Yamaha had cracked the code. The GTS was going to change everything. The engine was proven tech, a 1000cc Genesis motor from the FZR 1000, detuned to 99 horsepower for touring duty. Reliable as gravity, the frame was a massive aluminum beam that looked like it could support a building. ABS brakes came standard, which was space-age stuff in '93. The bodywork was all swoopy and aerodynamic. It looked like what people in the 80s thought the future would look like. But here's the thing about the future. It's expensive. The GTS cost $17,000 in 1993. That's $35,000 in today's money. For that price, you could buy a Honda CBR 900RR and a gold wing. The GTS was neither as fast as the sport bike nor as comfortable as the tourer. It was stuck in this weird middle ground where nobody wanted it. The riding experience was different. The front end didn't dive under braking, which felt wrong to anyone who'd ridden a normal bike. The steering was heavy at low speeds but got lighter as you went faster, the opposite of regular forks. Some journalists loved it. They said it was more stable, more predictable. Others said it felt like steering a shopping cart. Owners were split the same way. Yamaha killed it after 2 years. They sold about 500 in the US, maybe 2,000 worldwide. The technology wasn't wrong. BMW uses a similar system on their dual-lever bikes today. Bimota's TC uses hub-center steering. But Yamaha was asking people to pay luxury prices for experimental technology on a bike that wasn't particularly fast, comfortable, or pretty. That's a tough sell. Today, a clean GTS is worth serious money to collectors who appreciate weird engineering. Everyone else just stares and asks, what happened to the forks? Number 7. Suzuki RF 900R. The RF 900R was Suzuki's answer to a question nobody asked. What if we built a sport tourer that was actually a super bike in disguise? Not a fast touring bike. Not a comfortable sport bike. An actual super bike that happened to have saddlebags. In 1994, this was considered insane. Sport bikes were sport bikes. Tourers were tourers. The RF 900R said, why not both? And nobody knew what to do with it. The engine was a 937cc inline 4, making 123 horsepower. Those are proper superbike numbers for the mid-90s. But Suzuki didn't stop there. They gave it a 6-speed transmission when everyone else was using 5. The suspension was fully adjustable racing spec stuff. The brakes were 6-piston Tokico calipers that could stop time. This wasn't a sport tourer. It was a road-legal race bike wearing a disguise. The disguise was pretty good, though. Full fairing with actual wind protection, a seat that didn't require hemorrhoid cream after an hour. Passenger pegs that a human could actually use. You could mount hard luggage without looking ridiculous. The fuel tank held 5.3 gallons, enough for 200 miles of spirited riding. In 1994, this combination didn't exist anywhere else. But the market didn't get it. Sport bike guys looked at the comfort features and called it soft. Touring guys looked at the aggressive ergonomics and narrow seat and said no thanks. The magazines loved it. They called it the thinking man's sport bike. Problem was, most motorcyclists weren't thinking. They wanted their bikes in clearly defined categories. The RF 900R was having an identity crisis that nobody wanted to solve. The weight didn't help. 525 pounds wet. That's heavy for a sport bike, light for a tourer, perfect for nothing. Suzuki tried marketing it as a canyon carver for adults. They ran ads showing guys in their 40s looking contemplative next to their RFs. The message was clear. You've outgrown your GSX-R, but you're not ready for a Goldwing. This is your bike, except it wasn't. Those guys bought BMWs. Suzuki gave up after '97 in the US, though it lived on in other markets until 2001. Total sales numbers are hard to find because Suzuki would rather forget it existed, which is a shame because the RF 900R predicted the future. Look at modern sport tourers like the Kawasaki Ninja 1000 or the Suzuki GSX S1000 GT. They're doing exactly what the RF did just 25 years later. The RF was right, it was just right at the wrong time. Number 6. Honda VFR 750. The VFR 750 was Honda doing what Honda does best, building something so perfect that it's boring. Except it wasn't boring. It was brilliant. From 1990 to 1997, this was the motorcycle that magazine editors bought with their own money. Think about that. People who could ride anything, who got press bikes delivered weekly, went out and bought VFR 750s. That should tell you everything. The engine was a 748cc V4, making 106 horsepower. Not the highest number in the class, but Honda wasn't chasing numbers. They were chasing perfection. Gear-driven cams meant no cam chain maintenance ever. The sound? God, the sound. V4s have this howl that's completely unique, like a Formula One car that's been domesticated. The VFR's exhaust note could make grown men weep. The single-sided swing arm wasn't just for show, it made chain adjustment and wheel removal stupid simple. The suspension was this cool Pro-Link design that Honda spent millions developing. It worked. The bike handled like it was reading your mind, stable on the highway, flickable in corners, comfortable enough for all-day rides. It did everything well and nothing badly. But here's why. People forgot about it. It was too good. Motorcycles are supposed to have character, personality, quirks. The Italian bikes break down but sound like angels. The British bikes leak oil but have soul. The VFR 750 just worked every day for hundreds of thousands of miles. It was so reliable that people took it for granted. You can't write poetry about dependability. The styling didn't help its case for remembrance. Honda played it safe with smooth, inoffensive lines that aged well but never turned heads. It looked like what a computer would design if you asked for sport bike. No weird angles, no radical solutions, just aerodynamic efficiency and functional beauty. In the 90s, when everyone was trying to out-crazy each other with wild graphics and angular bodywork, the VFR looked like it was wearing a business suit to a rave. When Honda replaced it with the fuel-injected VFR 898, nobody mourned the 750's passing. It was just assumed the new one would be better. It wasn't. The 800 had VTEC that made the power delivery weird. It was heavier, more complex, more expensive. Suddenly, everyone remembered how perfect the 750 had been. Used prices for clean 750s started climbing and haven't stopped. Today, a mint low-mileage example can fetch $15,000. For a 30-year-old Honda, that's not nostalgia. That's recognition of brilliance that we didn't appreciate at the time. Number 5, Kawasaki ZRX 1100. The ZRX 1100 was Kawasaki admitting what everyone already knew: the 80s were better. In 1997, when everyone was building sharper, angrier, more track-focused bikes, Kawasaki looked backward. They took the legendary Z1000R Eddie Lawson replica from the 80s, gave it modern running gear, and said, "Remember when motorcycles were cool?" The answer was yes. Everyone remembered, but not enough people bought one. The engine was basically a bored-out Ninja ZX11 motor, 1,052 CDCs of inline-4 Fury making 120 horsepower. But this wasn't about peak power. This was about torque, mountains of it, available everywhere. You could lug it at 2,000 RPM in top gear or scream it to 11,000. It didn't care. It just made power. Linear, predictable, addictive power. The best part? It looked like a proper motorcycle. Round headlight, analog gauges, that gorgeous 18-liter fuel tank shaped like a teardrop. The paint schemes were perfect. Recreations of Kawasaki's racing colors from the early 80s. Lime green. Eddie Lawson, replica blue and green. You could park it next to an actual 83Z 1000R and struggle to tell them apart. Until you rode them. Then the ZRX's modern brakes and suspension made the old bike feel like a covered wagon. But Kawasaki misread the room. The guys who remembered the original Eddie Lawson replicas were in their 40s with bad backs and mortgages. They weren't buying naked bikes anymore. They were buying cruisers or adventure bikes. The younger riders who should have loved the ZRX were hypnotized by the GSX-R 750 and CBR 900RR. The ZRX was caught in generational limbo. The magazines tried to help. They gave it glowing reviews. Cycle World called it the perfect real-world sport bike. Motorcyclists said it was everything we loved about the 80s with none of the drawbacks. But magazine reviews don't sell motorcycles. Image sells motorcycles. And the ZRX's image was remember when you had hair. That's a tough marketing position. Kawasaki kept trying. They boarded out to 1200 cc's in 2001, added a half-fairing option, upgraded the suspension, nothing worked. By 2005 in the US market, it was dead, which is criminal because the ZRX was doing in the late 90s what every manufacturer is doing now, building retro-styled bikes with modern performance. The Z900RS that Kawasaki sells today, it's basically a ZRX with better marketing and worse ergonomics. The difference is timing. The ZRX was retro before retro was cool. Now, clean examples are becoming collectible, especially the Eddie Lawson replicas. People finally get it, 20 years too late, but they get it. Number 4, Aprilia RS 250. The RS 250 was a street-legal Grand Prix bike. No, really. Aprilia took their RGV 250 race bike, added the legal minimum of lights and mirrors, and said, here you go, try not to die. In 1995, you could walk into a dealer and buy a motorcycle that was literally winning races that same weekend. The catch? Almost nobody did. Americans looked at the 250 and saw a beginner bike. They were wrong. Dead wrong. This thing made 70 horsepower from 249 cc's. That's 280 horsepower per liter. Modern liter bikes don't even touch that. The power band was like a light switch. Nothing, 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 everything. It would hit 7,000 RPM and try to tear your arms off. The sound was like someone running a chainsaw through a Marshall amplifier. In Italy, teenagers were racing these things on the street and occasionally into trees. The chassis was pure race bike. Aluminum beam frame that weighed nothing. Suspension by Showa that was actually adjustable, not just pretend adjustable like most street bikes. Brembo brakes with braided lines. The whole bike weighed 366 pounds, ready to ride. That's 100 pounds less than a modern Ninja 400, with almost double the horsepower. Do the math on that power-to-weight ratio. But America didn't want it. Two-strokes were dead here. The EPA hated them. Insurance companies hated them. Dealers really hated them because they required constant maintenance and customers would complain. Aprilia brought in maybe a few hundred over several years. Most went unsold. Dealers were practically giving them away by 98. $2,500 for a factory race replica. Nobody cared. The Europeans got it, though. In Italy and Spain, the RS 250 was a legend. Kids would save for years to buy one. Racing schools used them. Track day heroes worshipped them. There was this whole culture built around these bikes that America completely missed. We were too busy arguing about Harley versus metric cruisers to notice that Aprilia was selling Grand Prix technology to teenagers. Now, good luck finding one. The few that made it to America are either crashed, seized from lack of maintenance, or locked in collections. Clean examples go for $15,000. Parts are impossible to find. Every RS 250 owner has the same conversation at bike meets. What is that? It's an Aprilia RS 250. Never heard of it. Exactly. The bike was too pure for its own good. It was a race bike that happened to be street legal, not a street bike that could go racing. In the 90s, that distinction mattered. Now we realize how special that was. Number 3, BMW K1200RS BMW in the 90s was weird. They were building these bizarre engines with cylinders laying on their sides, calling them flying bricks. Everyone else was building inline fours that stood up like normal engines. BMW said, "What if we lay them down flat?" Nobody asked for this. BMW did it anyway. The K1200RS was the pinnacle of this insanity, and it was absolutely brilliant in ways nobody appreciated until it was gone. Launched in 97, the K1200RS made 130 horsepower from its sideways four-cylinder. But that wasn't the impressive part. The impressive part was the torque curve. Dead flat from 3,000 to 9,000 RPM. You could ride this thing in third gear all day and never need to shift. It was like having an electric motor before electric motorcycles existed. Smooth, turbine-like power delivery that made every other bike feel agricultural. The aerodynamics were developed in a wind tunnel, which sounds normal now, but was space-age stuff in 97. The fairing was so good that BMW claimed you could ride at 120 miles per hour and still have a conversation with your passenger. They weren't lying. Magazine testers tried it. The bubble of still air behind that screen was supernatural. Your helmet stayed clean, bugs just went around you. It was like riding in a force field. But here's what killed it. It looked like a refrigerator. BMW's designers apparently thought curves were illegal. The K1200RS was all straight lines and right angles. The engine hung out the sides like tumors. The exhaust was this massive can that looked like it belonged on a diesel truck. In the late 90s, when everything was getting swoopier and more organic, the K1200RS looked like it was designed with a T-square and hatred for aesthetics. The technology was incredible, though. ABS was standard. The suspension had electronic adjustment, push a button, and change from sport to touring mode. Heated grips came standard. The instruments were digital LCD displays when everyone else was using analog gauges. It even had a trip computer that calculated fuel consumption. This was 1997. Most cars didn't have this stuff, but motorcyclists didn't care about technology. They wanted their bikes to look fast standing still. The K1200RS looked like it was doing taxes. BMW discontinued it in 2005, replacing it with the K1200S that looked properly modern and had less character than white bread. The K1200RS found its audience eventually. Older riders who wanted to go fast in comfort and didn't care what anybody thought. But that audience was small. Today, K1200RS prices are all over the map. Some sell for $3,000 because nobody wants them. Others go for $10,000 to the 5 guys who understand what BMW built. It was a bike designed by engineers for engineers. That's a very small demographic. Number 2, Ducati 907IE. The 907IE was Ducati's moonshot. In 1990, when Ducati was basically broke and building bikes in a shed, they decided to create the most advanced sport bike in the world. Fuel injection when everyone used carburetors. Liquid cooling when Ducatis were supposed to be air-cooled. 4 valves per cylinder when Ducati's whole thing was 2 valves. It was like Ferrari suddenly building a front-wheel drive minivan. Nobody knew what to make of it. The engine was completely new, 904 cc's, 90-degree V-twin, making 95 horsepower. Those aren't huge numbers, but the way it delivered power was revolutionary. The Weber-Morelli fuel injection was adapted from Formula 1. It had separate throttle bodies for each cylinder. The ECU had more computing power than most computers in 1990. It would adjust fueling based on air temperature, barometric pressure, even humidity. This was space shuttle technology in a motorcycle. The frame was a steel trellis, classic Ducati, but everything else was alien. The bodywork looked like it came from 5 years in the future. Massive air intakes fed the radiator and oil cooler. The tail section was this gorgeous single piece that looked sculpted by wind. The instrument cluster was fully digital, unheard of in 1990. Even the mirrors were specially designed for aerodynamics. Ducati spent money they didn't have making this perfect. But perfect doesn't sell motorcycles. Image sells motorcycles. And the 907IE's image was confused. Ducati purists hated it because it wasn't a traditional air-cooled 2-valve bike. Japanese bike buyers didn't trust Italian reliability. The price was astronomical, $15,000 in 1990 money, that's $35,000 today. For that money, you could buy 2 Honda CBRs or 3 Suzuki GSX-Rs. The reviews were spectacular, though. Every magazine that tested it came away converted. The handling was telepathic. The fuel injection made carburetor-equipped bikes feel like antiques. The power delivery was so smooth it felt like cheating. But spectacular reviews don't pay bills. Ducati sold maybe 1,000 worldwide over 3 years. In America, dealers couldn't give them away. They became infamous for sitting in showrooms for years, slowly dropping in price while nobody bought them. The real tragedy? The 907IE predicted Ducati's entire future. The liquid-cooled 4-valve engine became the basis for the 916 that saved the company. The fuel injection system evolved into what every Ducati uses today. The frame design influenced everything they built afterward. The 907IE was right about everything. It was just 5 years too early and $20,000 too expensive. Today, finding one is nearly impossible. The few that surface are either museum pieces or basket cases. There's no middle ground. Ducati built the future in 1990. Nobody bought it. So they simplified it, made it prettier, called it the 916, and suddenly everyone wanted one. Timing is everything. Number 1, Yamaha YZF 750. The YZF 750 was Yamaha's middle finger to racing regulations. In the early 90s, World Superbike had this weird homologation rule. You had to build 750cc 4s or 1000cc twins. Everyone else was building twins. And Yamaha said, watch this, and created the most sophisticated 750 ever made. It was faster than bikes with 25% more displacement. It won races. It should have changed everything. Instead, it changed nothing because nobody understood what Yamaha had built. The engine was a masterpiece. 749 cc's making 123 horsepower, but those numbers tell you nothing. This engine had titanium connecting rods. Titanium. In a street bike. In 1993. The valves were titanium too. The whole rotating assembly was so light that the engine could rev from idle to redline faster than you could blink. It would spin to 12,000 RPM and beg for more. The frame was even more impressive. Aluminum beam design that Yamaha spent millions developing in racing. But here's the crazy part. It was designed to flex. Everyone else was trying to build the stiffest frame possible. Yamaha's engineers realized that controlled flex improved traction and feel. They were right. The YZF 750 handled like nothing else. Journalists ran out of superlatives. It was telepathic, organic, alive. Yamaha's racing team used basically stock bikes to compete against million-dollar factory efforts. And they won. The YZF 750 won the Suzuka 8 hours. It won the Bull Door 24 hours. It was competitive in World Superbike against bikes that had massive displacement advantages. The press called it the giant killer. Privateers could buy one and actually compete at international level. This was unprecedented, but the market didn't care. In America, the YZF 750 cost $13,000. A CBR 900RR cost $10,000 and had more power. The Suzuki GSX-R 750 cost $9,000 and had better brakes. Buyers didn't understand that the YZF's price reflected the exotic materials and racing development. They just saw a smaller engine for more money. Sales were dismal. The racing success didn't translate to showroom traffic. Americans didn't watch World Superbike. They didn't know about Suzuka or the Bull Door. All they knew was that the YZF 750 cost more than bigger, faster bikes. Yamaha brought in tiny numbers, maybe a few hundred per year. Most sat unsold until dealers gave up and shipped them back. By 96 in the US, it was over. The irony is crushing. Everything Yamaha learned from the YZF 750 went into the YZF R1 that changed sport bikes forever. The frame technology, the engine design philosophy, even the bodywork influenced the R1. But where the R1 was marketed as a revolution, the 750 was just there. No hype, no fanfare, just the most advanced 750 ever built sitting in showrooms while everyone bought inferior bikes. Today, YZF 750s are unicorns. The few that exist in America are either track bikes that have been crashed and rebuilt dozens of times, or collector pieces that never get ridden. Prices are all over because nobody knows what they're worth. Is it worth $20,000 because it's historically significant? or 5,000 because nobody knows what it is. The market can't decide. What's certain is that Yamaha built something extraordinary, a street bike with Formula One technology, a giant killer that actually killed giants. And we ignored it because the numbers on the side were smaller than the competition. And there you have it. That's 10 forgotten motorcycles from the 1990s that were actually brilliant. Bikes that pushed boundaries, broke rules, and deserved better than dusty corners of dealerships. Did you own any of these? Did you pass one up and regret it? Let us know in the comments below. And seriously, if you know where there's a clean YZF 750 for sale, drop the location. We're asking for a friend. Obviously, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this trip through motorcycling's most underappreciated decade, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next deep dive into two-wheeled history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.